It's amazing today, that centering prayer that I picked, where right in the middle of the song he's saying, "My love is saved for the universe. See me now, I'm bursting." And yet we also hear, "Be still and rest." And they're both part of the same Spirit of Christ. The dichotomy and the possibilities of life after Christ rose is amazing. Our gospel today opens right after the two disciples have just returned from the road to Emmaus, and I resisted using that gospel again today because we hear it every time at this time of year. The two guys are walking along the road. Jesus appears to them. They don't recognize him. They have a lovely conversation all about Jesus. Then he decides to break the bread while they're sitting there eating. They recognize him and he disappears. So this is what they're talking about. You mean you walked all that way and you didn't recognize him? All of a sudden you recognize him, then he's gone? And just as they are explaining, yeah, he just disappeared, poof, he's popping into the room again. Their experience is unexpected and terrifying, for they think they are seeing a ghost. Yet he asks them, "Why are you afraid?" He basically explains to them, this is what I've been talking about all along. That everything ever written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms must be fulfilled. Then it says Christ opens their minds for they can finally see and understand all that was written about him. See, there's this image of these guys that they were always kind of bumbling idiots. They never quite got the message. Even when Christ sat down and explained exactly what it meant, they kind of nodded their heads, walked away and went, huh? So Christ has finally opened their minds. Reverend Michael Marsh states, it's not enough that the tomb is empty. It's not enough to proclaim Christ is risen. It's not enough to believe in the resurrection. At some point, we have to move from the event of the resurrection to experiencing the resurrection. Experiencing resurrected life begins with recognizing the risen Christ among us, recognizing Christ. That is a gift of Easter, and it's also the difficulty and challenge described in today's gospel. The problem here is that the actual sudden appearance of Christ in the room, what I call breaking in physically, Christ, God, is constantly breaking in everyday experience of normal people. Basically, that is what much of the Old Testament is about. God walks in the Garden of Eden. God shows up in Joseph's dream. God appears in a burning bush. God comes as a still small voice. So what's the shift here? What's the difference? There is obviously some sort of shift in that God has taken on the mantle of humanity to live and experience all that we have experienced. God walked among people for 33 years and offered wisdom and counseling and an example of how we should live. God was and still is among us. Reverend Marsh goes on to state, with Jesus' resurrection, however, God shatters human categories of who God is, where God's life and energy are to be found, and how God works in this world. Resurrected life can never be comprehended, contained, or controlled by human thought or understanding. See, Jesus' resurrection compels us, moves us, to step outside of our usual human understanding of reality and enter into a divine reality. The invitation here is for us to participate in the life of Christ and allow Christ to participate in our own lives. This isn't a God in heaven breaking in and leaving us again to our own devices. This is a living God who experiences our experiences, and as we live in Christ, Christ lives in us, so our own experiences become his. The resurrected life of Christ, it seems, is revealed in and through the created order. It is not, however, bound by creation or order. Rather, the resurrected body and life of Christ unite the visible and the invisible, matter and spirit, humanity and divinity. On one hand, Jesus has a real body, and on the other hand, is not subject to the natural laws of time and space. It's not one or the other, it's both. It's a new and different reality. This newness, this different reality is a unique and bold relationship between God and man. And no longer is God some far away, off in heaven judge, watching over creation like a man contemplates a chessboard, deciding what his next strategic move will be, which actually was quite a concept among the Greeks and the Romans at that time, that the gods just played with us and we were just subject to their whims. This is now a God that we have a relationship with. This is a God we have permission to seek out. This is a God who invites us into a loving relationship, to take rest. and to take comfort, to live as a people of the resurrection, and yet we are often blind to that invitation. We actually fight the invitation to see ourselves as beloved children of the resurrection. As a matter of fact, back to Reverend Marsh again, he refers to us as being bound to the created order. You see, the degree to which we allow ourselves to be bound by the created order is the degree to which we are unable to see a resurrected life and holiness in this world. We bind ourselves through our fears, through our sorrows and losses, our runaway thoughts and distractions, our attachments and our addictions to things, people, and even beliefs. Sometimes it's our own unwillingness to allow or to trust God to grow and change us. In binding ourselves to the created order, we lose recognition of the ability to live in the sacred, to live in the here and now. That's the very opposite of resurrected life. In other words, in the beginning, there was light and dark and so on. There were the law and the prophets. There was a literal world in which Christ lived in. There was a hierarchy and an expected order to life and people and things. But God, as Christ, broke through all that so we could live and be stronger. We can live in a beloved relationship with God, part of a beloved relationship that is recognizing that God is with us, literally, the word Emmanuel, God is with us. The resurrected life of Christ reveals that all creation, every one of us, are filled with God, holiness, and divinity. As they say in the play Corpus Christi, God whispers, all humans are divine. Nothing can bind or supersede the grace that is given us through the resurrection. Unconditional love, unconditional forgiveness, and an unconditional life. We are called into this experience more than just God breaking in, but a resurrected Christ. This resurrected Christ is with us day in and day out, revealing God's grace to us. All we need to do is look and see and touch and feel and then know. Take the experience that is here and move it here and know that God is here. The gospel says that Christ opened their minds to the understanding of the scriptures. Quote, he said to them, "This is what is written, that Christ will suffer and rise from the dead on the third day and change the heart and life for the forgiveness of sins must be preached in his name." Living life in the resurrected Christ, we have a changed heart and life. We have to live to proclaim that there is nothing you can do that can separate you from the love of God. It's not just our job up here as preachers to preach that. It's your job to take it out and share it with the world. As a called Christians who live in a resurrected life, there is nothing but forgiveness. If we allow ourselves to feel, to learn, to know the resurrected Christ. Christ our God longs and desires to open our minds to the understanding of the scriptures, to understand all that has been written, spoken, and revealed about him in whatever form that happens and has happened. That's what Jesus did for the disciples, and it's what he does for us, literally. This is not an academic or intellectual understanding. That the disciples were witnesses does not mean that they know all the answers. We've learned that. It means that they now have the life that Jesus wanted to give them. That they are witnesses not based on what they know, but on who they are, how they live, and their relationship with the risen Christ. That also means now that we have life that Jesus wants to give us, we are witnesses, not based on what we know, but who we are and how we live in relationship with Christ. It was good 2,000 years ago and it's still good today. I have said the secret to being a Christian starts with telling the story. And that's what we do here as a congregation every Sunday. We tell the story as it is written. But there's a second part of the story. There's a second part of the story of the resurrected Christ, and that's in you. How you live this life, how you seek out and find Christ in your day-to-day life, and allow that to manifest in this world. And that, as Paul Harvey would say, is the rest of the story. The story doesn't end with Christ's resurrection. It doesn't end with Christ ascending to heaven. It doesn't end with the last word in the last testament in what we call the Gospels. We are the rest of the story. We are living documents of Christ here on earth. So the challenge before us is to seek out the Christ that doesn't just break into our lives, but the Christ that is with us every day. We're not to look to a God that is there to offer us an answer in prayer or a miracle on a special occasion, but to see and live out the resurrected Christ in our daily lives. So where is the risen Christ in our daily lives? Where are some of the places it is easy to see a vibrant God in our lives? I don't know how this happens. I can't explain. I can't give you a set of instructions or a to-do list, Reverend Marsh goes on to say. He says that would be like giving you a set of instructions on how to fall in love. The resurrected life is not acquired, it is received. It happens when we risk unbinding ourselves from the usual ways of seeing, living, and relating. This is not a rejection of the natural order. It's allowing the natural order to open to and reveal something more. That's what happened for the disciples with Jesus' hands and feet, with his flesh and bones and broiled fish. They saw and recognized something about Jesus, and in so doing so, they saw and recognized something about themselves. Holiness. And this happens for us too. I think I do disagree with Reverend Marsh on one thing. You see, there is a set of instructions. There always has been. Through Christ's teaching and way of being, we get a foundation. Christ shows us how to live, how to pray, how to eat, and how to love. Yes, I did say eat, pray, love, and I told you that was coming. And I don't mean the movie. I mean, this is the example of how to live a resurrected life. This is how it is shown in the way Christ walked on this earth. Now, I want you to think about a time in your life when you lost track of time. I don't mean you forgot what time it was, but you were so awake, so present, so awestruck maybe that you entered into a new world. Think about a time when life seemed more real than it had ever been before and touched you, or you tasted life in a way like never before. Recall a moment when your heart opened, softened, and you knew you were somehow different. Remember that day when you sensed something new was being offered? Possibilities you did not create for yourself. They just opened up. Reflect on that moment when you realized that you were okay and you could again start to live. Those are the moments when Christ opens up our minds to understand. They are moments of awe and wonder that leave us in sacred silence. They fill our eyes, our ears. We weep not from sorrow or pain, but the water of new life. They are the moments in which we say, I never want this to end. I don't want to leave this place or time right now. What a blessing. One of the Desert Fathers, Marcios the Great, believes that when we are with the resurrected Christ, we ourselves become that same light in the world. He says, now he's a very poetic writer, and this has been translated. If you have become the throne of God, if the heavenly charioteer has descended within you, and your soul has become a single spiritual eye, and has become completely luminous, and if you have been clothed in the light of the ineffable and fed from the spiritual delights and drunk from the living water, and all your inner life has been tested and proven in hope, then all the truth that you have started to live the eternal life, even in this present age, your soul has found its rest in God. You see, what he is saying is when we make that connection with the pure light or touch that pure moment when we are so aware of everything around us, in those moments where time seems to stand still and we experience everything as a glorious lighted moment, everything as God. In each of those moments, the one who is fully alive and risen, the Christ is calling us to see and recognize him, to join him and to discover our new life. This is the authentic self that we long to become, the self that we already are, and the self we are becoming. This is resurrection life. In this resurrected life and living in the here and now and trying to be fully human and fully alive in the ways that Christ was, we become a light in the world. You are the light of the world. When you rest and live in God, it is God that is seen through you. You are the face the hands, the feet of Christ in the world. Nothing new, you have heard it before. This isn't about something new. It's about allowing Christ to open our minds that you may see and understand. To quote the Desert Father again, when the soul becomes totally radiant and covered in ineffable beauty of the glory of the light of Christ, it comes to share the very life of the divine Spirit, so much perfection that it is changed into every chamber, the throne of God. We are invited, and we do share in the very life of Christ, a life that lives here today, just as real, just as present to us as it was to the disciples over 2,000 years ago. We just have to take the time. Make the time to practice seeing, to practice hearing God and now and today. And how this is done is different for each of us. Some people like contemplation in action. Some find it through studying the scriptures. Others find it through expressions of song, music, and dance and art. I cannot tell you any one way is best. What I can tell you is that you must seek it out and find your own way. Where is your secluded room? Where is your place that Christ is going to just pop in on you? Do you take the time to reflect and see where you might have seen Jesus today? Do you ever stop and just pause in the awe and the wonder in the moment of where you happen to be? It's really easy to do that out here. It's just so beautiful in the garden. But you ever do it just walking down an amazing city that was constructed by human hands that towers to the heavens? There are retreat centers around us, surrounding all of Los Angeles. We have writings of the apostles. We have the writings and reflections of the Desert Mothers and Fathers. We have great teachers like Henry Nouwen, James Finley, Thich Nhat Hanh. You just need to find your own path. There are places around Los Angeles where you can stop for days of silence or just to be with God in prayer through guided retreats. There are centers that offer classes in painting or sculpture or weaving. I asked you the other week, do you play and pray? There are professional spiritual companions who will walk with you and help you discover how Christ is walking with you today. In today's centering prayer song, we heard Eddie Vedder sing, I feel part of the universe open up to me, my emotions that were so submerged, broken down to kneeling. Fill my heart with discipline, put there for the teaching. In my head I see clouds of stairs, and help me as I'm reaching. A simple prayer. But when that prayer becomes reality, he goes on to say that my love is saved for the universe. And see me now, I'm just bursting. That is the future that is paved with better days, as he says, not because Christ died, but because Christ lives. So I challenge you, when you leave here today, maybe take some time to pay attention to the world around you. Maybe a little bit sharper. Maybe say a prayer to see the small things, or better yet, say a prayer to see the big things that we're always passing by and never stop to look. Listen for God's still small voice. How is God calling you into a deeper, a richer life, a resurrected life? And once you find it, or once you hear it, and once you follow where it leads you, I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the story from you. Amen.